Texas, right? It's going to be exported. So what advantage?
No, that's not right.
Yeah.
No,
That's not right.
The Valero plant and the Motiva plant have been built there. They can process that heavy oil that they call it. And
Okay,
they've
but-
already invested billions.
Okay, but the purpose is primarily for export.
No,
Well, that's what we hear all the time.
Well, that's not right.
They've already built, Valero and Motiva and some other plants have already put in billions of dollars. They're ready for that pipe because they can process that heavy.
Wait a minute, so where is it going, my question? Is it staying in the United States?
Yes.
Yeah, well, they'll convert it to gasoline and
That's
other products
gas.
here.
Valero only refines.
Yes.
They can sell it to anybody they want.
Well, you just mentioned that any producer of oil or gas will sell it at the highest bidder, okay? That's the problem that we have. Now, if the local people around here get their natural gas for 50 cents less than what they're paying, now that would be an advantage for us to get the pipeline here. But that don't happen, and you guys know that.
No, I don't know.
You know? Well, gasoline's bumping $5 a gallon, okay?
We're in a world market.
Well,
There's
that's
no
our problem.
elasticity
Yeah.
in the supply.
The world
Because of
market
China
is our problem.
and India's economy of the last 8 years. And they have sopped up all, we used to be able to call the Saudis and say, hey, it's too high. Turn on the valves, and they could increase the supply and force it down. They don't have that ability anymore. They have maybe 1 or 2 million barrels tops, and then they're running flat out.
But it's really not a true supply-demand situation. That's his point. And a lot of these air tactics, we live in a world where somebody threatens to shut down the Straits of Hormuz, the very next day, or even by the close of business, the price of oil has gone up X number of dollars.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a psychological
10% of it is that. And,
Well,
and the
what
trading
broke this country a handful of
forward
years
bond.
ago was the oil business, okay? And every poor guy felt that blow. And that's the important, and then the high values of real estate is what killed this country. So y'all, my message is y'all in the oil business needs to think about the poor guy at home that can't afford $4 a gallon.
Well, it doesn't work that way.
Well, it should work that way.
Well, I mean, the oil companies are like, the oil industry is like number 15 in the industries of this country in terms of rate of return. They make about 8%. Everybody thinks that when the price of oil goes up, they make more. They don't. It's just, that's their feedstock. It just all is proportional. And the only thing is, when their profits come out, they look enormous. Yeah, but forget that the platform out there in 2,400 feet of water costs $2 billion. I mean, you're just dealing in a lot bigger numbers. And look at what the pharmaceuticals make. They make a 32% rate of return. And the oil and gas industry is about number 15 in industries in this country.
Apple computers. If we get the XL pipeline down here, will that oil be cheaper than buying it, from the air?
Well, I think
I'm
not going
It'll just be transportation.
Yeah.
A little transportation, but probably not appreciably different. I mean, it's going to trade at the Cushing or West Texas Intermediate or,
Would we be putting gasoline in the pipeline and sitting at the East Coast so that they could reduce the amount of oil they're buying overseas?
That's
And refining?
They're closing all the refineries down in New Jersey.
Yeah.
well, with the idea.
We haven't built a new refinery in over 30 years in this country.
And that's because of
Regulation.
They're building one in Canada right now, the first one built in the continental United States in, like you said, 30 or 40 years. My brother-in-law is working on it.
In
I mean,
Yeah.
I think some of our problem is refining,
Because of
some of it's bottlenecking, and some of it's speculation and fear. Speculation generated by fear, but a lot of it is market driven.
Most of it is value dollar.
That too.
You're next.
Michael, how do you feel about frivolous lawsuits?
About what?
Frivolous lawsuits?
Frivolous lawsuits, okay. I am endorsed by the Texas Medical Association. And I'm endorsed by them primarily because of my stand against Obamacare. But doctors have known me for a long time because I was defending doctors and hospitals when they were being sued right and left. And we were losing doctors in droves. And it wasn't right. And so I took a stand back then for medical liability reform. This was over 10 years ago. And frankly, a lot of folks said, you shouldn't be doing that. I said, yeah, but it's wrong. And not only is it wrong, it's hurting doctors and we're losing our doctors. And so I became an advocate for it. And when Governor Perry signed that legislation back in 2003, I was invited to stand alongside Governor Perry when he signed that legislation. So I'm against frivolous lawsuits. I've always been against frivolous lawsuits. Again, I'm not a get along, go along Charlie. I stand up for what's right.
Are you in favor of taking down the barriers for insurance companies being able to cross state lines?
Yes. See, I think that's something, there are a couple of things we can do to help lower the cost to families for health coverage. You can have associated health care plans where businesses, groups, similar, can join together, might be like all store owners, something like that, join together and become a larger unit so they can negotiate better deals and get better deals than just Joe two individual going out in the insurance market. Then be able to do like you do for your life insurance, go across state lines and get the best deal. And also health maintenance plans. So there's some free market alternatives that I think could bring down the cost of health insurance for families. Yes, sir.
May I address your frivolous lawsuits?
Yes, sir.
We all agree that a frivolous lawsuit shouldn't go forward.
Right.
But there's avenues that the lawyers can take prior to getting to that point, discovery and so on. Anyway, the problem is not a frivolous lawsuit, but the amount of damages that you might obtain through a legitimate lawsuit. Like a death is worth more than $600,000 or $300,000 when the defendant is absolutely guilty of malpractice or whatever the case may be. So there's a big difference between frivolous lawsuits and collecting a legitimate finding by the jury or the court. And everyone needs to understand that.
Yeah. Well, that's a matter that the state legislature dealt with, debated, discovered, and determined back then, and that's, of course, that is a state issue, which is for that, or the level of damage that can be recovered in the medical malpractice law.
Thank you.